Because that's what they do. And last year, everyone across the country got two. They randomly had two different DBQs. So you just got one to the other. One was a great question, and one everyone hated. Yeah, it's the draw. That's what makes standardized testing fun. Hey, everybody. Does everyone have the review packet I gave yesterday? No, I'm sorry. The terms review I gave you on Tuesday and the study guide from yesterday. Everyone have both? All right, good. I'm not giving you any homework this week, and there'll be a little bit of reading. Well, we have an EV coming up. There'll be some reading. We have to kind of get back on track, but you can get started on those terms. You get a few done. Doesn't take that long. Get a few done. You get started on. Just it builds back that memory, and don't forget, I reward you immensely. And so, where do we finish it? Huh? Hitler. And who came up with, or who was the first leader of the fascist party? Mussolini. And what was the philosophy they believed in, where there's a hierarchy from the leader on down, race, sex, everything else? What is it again? Well, that is a. Who's reading that? It is the fascist party. But what is the ideology where there is a natural hierarchy? Yes. Yeah, social Darwinists. And they believed in militarism, nationalism. Oh, what was it? The Great Fear. What kind of ideas did they hate because they made people weak and vulnerable? Say it again. Yeah, independent rights, those liberal ideals of democracy and rights. And they called those what? Yeah, we're feminine ideals. We're manly. We take what we want. And so we have what was the name of the really high prices? So we got hyperinflation. What was the name of the German, the republic they had in between the wars after the 1920s? Weimar. And okay, let's get going. We got Hitler. Let's run where we could, right? So Hitler, he finished off with the rank of essentially a corporal. So the lowest of the non-commissioned officers, a war hero, finished the war in a hospital, blinded by mustard gas. He was very much involved, or very much believed the myth, or at least said he did, because he knew that filled the resentment of people. So he kind of got rolled up into the Civil War. He actually even joined the communist revolt in Bavaria for a while on the side of the socialists, which is ironic. He just, what else is he going to do? But as the German government became established, he was recruited by former German officers who were now part of their police, who were worried about these right or left wing parties that might have there are all these attempted overthrowing of the government. And he was recruited to spy on the German party. Here is the membership card that he got of this tiny little party in Munich, in Bavaria, called the German Workers' Party, or the Deutsche Arbeiter Party, as a spy. And as a spy, he could hang around because that was his job. He liked it so much he stayed. And people saw talent in him, and he eventually became the leader of the German Workers' Party, which they renamed, we'll go through the naming process, a spy. They renamed it the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or as they like to call themselves, the National Socialists. Yeah.
Was he a war hero?
Yeah. He was a war hero. He was awarded the Iron Cross, ironically, by a Jewish officer. Irony is 1% of the population were Jews, and most of them were assimilated. They called themselves National Socialists, but if you take the German words for this, National Socialistic, CI, Nazi. They actually didn't like the term Nazi. That was originally used as an insult. They preferred National Socialist, even though their mortal enemy were the socialists. But there is Hitler during the war, right there. So that's where you get the name. Thus, the Nazis. And they were a tiny little party made up almost solely of angry veterans from the World War I and the Free Corps. angry people, resentful. And there's some reason to be angry. When the veterans got home, they were horribly mistreated, ignored. They went to a country that was going through an economic downturn and no one cared what they went through. And they'd gone through hell and made it back. And so they played on this resentment. And so here are some of the members of the Free Corps who would join the party. Here are marching veterans. Eventually they would get some really cheap brown uniforms that were going to go to colonial Africa. So it's gone. That's the brown shirts. And you see now with the swastika, early members of this party. It was a tiny, minuscule party. But then, here's a few more members of it. They still have their uniforms. They would recruit in beer halls, beer gardens. Free beer, come. I think you're going to send that recruiting tactic. American political parties did that too. Here they are, one of the most famous beer gardens in all of Munich and all of the world, called the Hofbrauhaus. It's now a big tourist trap. So if you go to Munich, it's like everybody goes to the Hofbrauhaus. It's kind of a big deal. And in the upstairs of it, they would meet. And there they actually planned an attempt to overthrow the government in 1923. If you go to Munich today, and if you get on a tour, they only let you off if you're on a tour. You can go up to the upstairs where they did it. And even though there are a few swastikas, those are gone. There's a trumpet and eagles that are the fascist style that are still up in the upstairs of this beer garden. It's a beer garden, but it's a restaurant. That's what I do. And they have a little, I call them an Oompa band, two minutes and baritone. It's for tourists. It's kind of cool. But that would lead to take advantage of hyperinflation, the beer hall pooch. Pooch is another word for coup, attempted overthrow. And what they thought is this little tiny cadre, taking the example of the Bolsheviks, with just a few people, they could storm the Capitol, go through the streets and looking organized. You notice they still have their helmets on. From World War I, they could by a quick flash attack, take over the government of Munich, and then it would just spread throughout Germany. Even though nobody outside of Munich knew who the National Socialists were. That's what they thought. And there's Hitler in a lederhosen, looking ridiculous, but he's trying to, with Bavaria. So it failed miserably. Here they are in front of the Opera House after it. They were arrested. Hitler was arrested. A dismal failure. But a sympathetic judge allowed Hitler to turn the trial into an attack on the Treaty of Versailles. And instead of getting life imprisonment, he served less than 2 years in prison for treason. Here he is in prison. Bandits were in prison, but you don't need it. I'm lying with that. He's in prison. He had 3 cells that were hooked together. He had his own personal secretary in his own cell with him. He had people come visit him. Food came because some of the richest people in Munich saw the National Socialists as a way to stop socialism. And so here he is picking out the cell window, but it was almost like a fine hotel. And in prison, Hitler would walk around and rant. He would dictate to this man right here, Rudolf Hess, his personal struggle, the fights he had gone through. And he presented as, it's my fight, but my fight to save Germans and German civilization. And they would publish this rant almost verbatim. And what would they call his book? Or My Struggle. And there are the original. And it reads like a guy walking around the prison cell ranting. Now, I think the ideology is horrific, but it's hard to get to the ideology because it's all over the place. There is no set narrative. He rambles a little bit about his life and goes off on something else. There'll be a page after page about the evils of Versailles and communists and Jews. And then this one, I'll never forget this. I'm reading this. God, this is awful. And then all of a sudden there are 10 pages on syphilis. And all evils of syphilis. Like, how do we get to syphilis? And then we're back to Jews. And then back to communists. It is all over the place. And it's got to read it for a class. And it was an awful read in so many ways. And so people would be required reading, it became a big deal. You had to have it at your house in Germany after 1933. But I don't think anyone actually really read the thing. Maybe a few quotes here and there, but he laid out a couple of things. First off, he understood propaganda. He just innately knew it. He was not intelligent, but he knew certain things and understood propaganda. And that's where he came into the concept of, and everybody write down the big lie. And understood that if you're going to lie, lie big. Because nobody would actually believe little lies. And I put the quote up there. The great masses of the people will more easily fall victims to a big lie than a small one. That might seem counterintuitive, but he understood something. If the lie is so big, people would just assume he wouldn't lie that big. People expect little lies all the time. Just innately understood that and repeat it over and over and over again. Just repeat it. He got it. It wasn't a source of brilliance, but he had this audacity to do anything that was hard to deal with. He never told the truth, etc. Made it very difficult to deal with. And in this, he laid out Nazi ideology. It started jumping to become that. Here he is actually right when he got out of prison in front of the cathedral. So he got out and they basically decided we're just going to stick with the political system. No more pushes. But the party was tiny. So let's go through the ideology. Now he's fascist. This is authoritarian. It's totalitarian. They believe in anti-liberal ideas, rabidly anti-communist. But one of the things about fascism, you can have these certain things about these authoritarian dictatorships. But then Hitler, of course, molded it to German politics, as would happen any place. We'll get to a Spanish fascist by the name of Francisco Franco. It'll be perfect for Spanish politics. So number one, the biggest thing, Versailles. Here's Germany losing all the land, surrounded by enemies. The Treaty of Versailles forced upon the German people this evil, vile instrument that is crushing Germany. And here are Germans. This is basically trying to show Versailles and Germans working enslaved for somebody else. And this is actually a British cartoon talking about the Germans ripping out from the straitjacket of the Treaty of Versailles. But the idea is that Germany, we weren't losing, could have won that war, but we're forced to sign this horrible treaty. Why? Well, of course, the British and the French and the Americans, we understand that. But there must have been an enemy within. And they're traitors within who Germans have a name for everything. Thus, here's a great German word, Das Staatsagenda. Everybody write down the stab in the back. That's what that means. They were stabbed in the back. Traitors within Germany. And I should add this. See, dangerous. Because once you say there are traitors in your own country, what do you do to traitors? And that means we have enemy amongst our own people. So political rivals are not just people that we have a disagreement about the path of the country. They're traitors who should. This is a dangerous path. So back to this. Pretty picture. And it represented businessmen, especially banks, who were stabbing Germans in the back. And you notice it's that swastika. You know that wasn't used during the war. Post-war, Free Corps, taking advantage of that. But who were the ones doing it? Here's another good one. Certain group opposed to the war. I said it was workers fighting workers. And you can see it by the color they're wearing. Who were doing it? Socialists and the communists. They're the ones who stabbed us in the back. Oh, they act like Germans. They look like Germans. They look like everybody else. But it's a traitorous group inside. Now, a little bit of this happened in the Red Scare. You're going to see in the first Red Scare, you're going to hear almost the exact same rhetoric about communists after 1949 in the United States. An enemy within. So, who are the enemy? We need a scapegoat. So you got to demonize somebody who's not really German, aka the other. This is classic xenophobia. Xenophobia. What's xenophobia? That protection of our own, or fear of outsiders, fear of others. So implying there are people within this country are enemies. And so it's by where they're from, who they are, what they believe, what their religion is, what their philosophy, etc. So it's basically talking about which one are you for? Nazis or an Soviets, communists. And that picture represents that. First off, hatred of communists and socialists. The organizing principle. That's why big money started pouring in for the communists or for the socialists, for the fascists. I'm going to eventually get them. But the liberals, those who wanted the republic, do Nazi ideology, those who want the republic, those who want democracy, those who believe in individual rights, are either dupes that will allow the communists in, or traitors within, like a Trojan horse that will undermine us with democracy so socialists can come in and take over. They hated liberal ideas. So for them, law and order was only to stop the others. Nazis don't have to follow the law. We're above that. So, businessmen, but not all. There are good German businessmen and bad businessmen. Who are the bad ones? More and more the bankers. And the same kind of prejudice, remember Father Coughlin in the United States? Anti-banker. Then Slavs. So we've already mentioned what the Slavs were. And what Nazi ideology were, is that Slavs were an inferior race that was being used to dominate and control Slavic populations, and the biggest Slavic state is now the Soviet Union, and they're just wasting the land that they live on. But not just them. What about all these decadent ideas that are coming about? They hate the educated classes. As they saw, the educated classes were using their so-called expertise to dominate and control. Nazis were rapidly anti-science, unless the science was Nazi. So they liked sciencey stuff, like the social Darwinistic science, fake racial science, but they hated real science. I got to be very clear about it. That's a very good thing looking back. Hindsight. Many of the leading scientists in the world were either German or not part of Europe, and they would be forced to flee because of fascism, including men, like Enrico Fermi. Guy who came up with the first chain reaction. Or Albert Einstein. Or we can go on and on. Klaus Fuchs, there were others. So all these scientists would flee. Fortunately, the Germans, the Nazis were not capable of taking advantage of all the science they actually did. That's scary. And the media. The media promoted these decadent ideas. They really hated like big city decadent ideas. They saw they were either feminine or they were rapidly like homosexual and things like that. It was just, as they saw, that was pushed by the so-called liberal media, as they called it. But who was behind all of this? And the key element here is, they said, okay, we have all these groups that are against us. They're jealous of true Germans because of our greatness. But who's behind it? Some leading communists, liberals, bankers. The largest population of the group behind lived in Slavic lands. The most educated, some of the leaders of the media. They all had one thing in common, according to Nazi ideology, they were Jews. And that was the key. Jews were behind everything. So Hitler gained popularity due to anti-Semitic ideas. But, due to communist ideas, but behind everything was anti-Jew. And by the time World War II started, Jews equal Bolsheviks. Remember, Bolsheviks are communists, so they equal the same thing. Look at this. This is a great piece of propaganda. It really shows this attitude. Now, this is actually during World War II, and it's showing the United Nations. The United Nations are people, the British, the United States, and the Soviets. Yes, that's where the term for the United Nations came from. The World War II alliance against Germany. But who's behind them all? Horrible caricature. And what's fascinating is, the vast majority of Jews who lived in Slavic lands were dirt poor. And so my niece and nephew who are Jewish, their relatives came from what is now Lithuania. They had nothing when they came out of the citizenship. 1890s. Nothing. But when some came over, yes, all of their relatives were killed in 1942. So, why they hate the master race? They hate the superior race of the Aryans. They're jealous. I've told you about the Aryans before, so this was not where the Nazis came from. This goes way back, even before there was a German Empire. But this idealized German, which there's a lot of people around the world that are not Germans that have blonde hair and blue eyes, but that's what they laid out. So this generic, idealized family, and here, that's for the Hitler Youth. And they hate us to try to purify the German blood. Thus, you remember the term for the term for racialized breeding in the United States? Yeah, they very much believed in eugenics. And here's a eugenic thing showing the inferior race will breed more than the superior race. So we have to start creating out these basically birthing farms called Lebensborn. Yeah. Oh my goodness, we forgot Flamingo Friday. Let's do Flamingo Friday right after we get through Nazi ideology. We'll need a palate cleanser. That sound good to everybody? We need a palate cleanser. All right, so they have birthing farms where they get German women who had to prove their Aryan roots. They had to go through that to show who their parents were, all the way back to their great grandparents. And then they would have like these birthing farms. That is the symbol for the SS, which we'll get to on Monday. But eugenics. And that is why for example, the Netherlands or Norway or other places were conquered, they wouldn't have recruited areas where there's a lot of people who kind of look vaguely Germanic and say that they're Aryans, and they'd be recruited into the German forces. The part of the SS that were the combat soldiers fought in SS. That's the Dutch recruiting post, or Norwegians. When the Reichstag was taken by the Soviets at the end of April of 1945, some of the defenders of the burnt out German parliament were Norwegians. They fought to the death because now they couldn't go home. So the ironic twist of Soviets, many of the Soviets were actually from Kazakhstan, so this kind of weird international thing, for defeating Norwegians in the German capital. So, and then the leader principle. And they came up with a term for it. He basically created a position after the president of Germany, we're not going to go into details, but the president died, called der Führer, the leader. And once again, they threw out like the cult of the leader. His picture's going to be everywhere. His speeches will be memorized. And he had a great ability to give speeches that rallied the population. He had this charm. And the charm was not, okay, here's a man to kind of suck you in. His strident and seemingly determined belief in what he said, I will fight for what I believe in, appealed to people. And even though he was Austrian, so his accent was a little bit different than most Germans, it appealed to them too, because he didn't seem like this polished politician that was trying to manipulate them. He's one of us, a veteran. He would always wear his Iron Cross to show that he was not only a war hero, but a veteran like all these other mistreated people. And he was never wrong. And the idea was he always knew, and that cult really came about. He's never wrong. For example, he's anti-communist. And in 1939, he would sign an agreement with the Soviets. What? He's never wrong. Don't question it. He knows what he's doing. And there's something else. He was clearly a pathological liar. But this is also a strategy. If you lie all the time, and lies all the time, lying all the time. But then he would say everyone's lying. But I'm lying for you. If everyone's lying and he lies all the time, you never know. If you never know the truth, what do you do? How do you feel if you never know the truth? Yay, things are great. I never know the truth. Hey, if you never know what's true, don't you feel pretty insecure? If you have no idea what the reality is, if you're being told, basically, I'm creating my own reality and don't trust anybody else's reality. What's true? Feel insecure. Feel nervous. Don't you want security? Who will provide it? The guy who lies for you. He lies all the time because he feels he has to. But he said, I will protect you. I will protect you from the liars who lie against you. It helps strongly. Authoritarians lie all the time. And it's strategy. It might not be, they might not be thinking about it. They might be just natural. And for Hitler, it was natural. He was kind of a convict. But pay attention. So his picture would be everywhere. And you notice nobody else in the picture for Germany, fascist eagle. And this slogan would be all over. I'm both, I'm right, I'm fewer. One people, one nation, one league. Everywhere that would be. All in the same. One leader, and that's very social Darwinistic. Most people, even Germans, don't really know what's good for them. But the leaders know. Trust them. You're Germans, you're superior, and therefore, oh, I like this one. Vote for him, yeah. And you notice everybody? Are they even individuals anymore? They don't matter. He's the only one that matters. You